I'm Janet, 38 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a small house that has always felt more like a sanctuary than just a place to sleep. By day, I'm a financial analyst, a job that suits my meticulous and orderly nature. But my real job for the past few years has been managing the life of my mother, Helen. This story is about how my brother, the golden child, turned our mother's twilight years into his personal playground, and how I used the very skills he always mocked to tear down his world of lies. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My world revolves around numbers, patterns, and logic. As a financial analyst, I find comfort in the black and white certainty of a spreadsheet. Balance sheets don't lie. Profit and loss statements don't have hidden agendas. It was a stark contrast to my family life, which had become a messy landscape of gray areas, unspoken resentments, and my brother's charming, hollow excuses. Our family unit, once a sturdy triangle, had warped after my father's passing 5 years ago. It was just me, my mother Helen, and my younger brother Marcus. My mother Helen was a retired librarian. Her entire life had been dedicated to the quiet, orderly world of books. She was a woman who found joy in precision, in the Dewey Decimal System, in a perfectly balanced sentence. But time, cruel and relentless, had started to fray the edges of her sharp mind. It began subtly: misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, repeating stories. Her doctor called it mild cognitive impairment, a gentle term for a thief that was slowly stealing the brilliant woman I'd always known. As her memory faded, her vulnerability grew, and I found myself stepping into a role I hadn't asked for but wouldn't shirk: her protector. I was the one who took her to doctor's appointments, managed her medications, and made sure her bills were paid. A few years ago, when she accidentally paid the same utility bill 3 times, we sat down together and she made a difficult decision. She signed over power of attorney to me. "I trust you, Janet," she'd said, her hand trembling slightly as she signed the papers. "You've always been the responsible one." That trust was a weight I carried every single day, a promise I intended to keep no matter what. My brother, Marcus, was the other side of the coin. A year younger than me, he was the charismatic one, the dreamer. While I was building a stable career, Marcus was always chasing the next big thing. His latest venture was a tech startup he vaguely described as disrupting the digital wellness space. He had the vocabulary of a Silicon Valley CEO, but as far as I could tell, none of the results. He was perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough, always just one investor meeting away from changing the world. My mother adored him. In her eyes, Marcus was the sun, and I was the reliable, predictable Earth that orbited him. She saw his ambition as brilliance, his frequent requests for money not as failures, but as the necessary fuel for his inevitable success. The arrangement was that I handled the practicalities of Mom's life, the finances, the healthcare, the boring stuff, while Marcus provided the joy. He'd visit her, bringing flowers and stories of his exciting life. He'd make her laugh, and for that I was genuinely grateful. Her world was shrinking, and his visits were a bright spot. "He has such a wonderful spirit," she'd often say after he left, a warm glow on her face. I never had the heart to tell her that his wonderful spirit was often funded by my own loans to him. Loans he always promised to pay back once his company took off. The first signs of serious trouble started with the credit card statements. My mother had 2 cards which I kept for her. One was for emergencies, and the other she used for small, everyday purchases at the local grocery store or pharmacy. Her spending was modest and predictable. Then, a few months ago, the balances started to climb. Not by a little, but by thousands. When I first saw a charge for a luxury hotel in Miami, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I called Mom, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey Mom, did you buy something online recently? Maybe a gift for someone?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh, I don't think so, dear," she replied, her voice distant. "You know I don't like putting my card details on that computer thing. Did I forget something?" Her confusion was genuine, and it hurt to hear the anxiety in her voice. "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry about it. I'll look into it. It's probably just a mistake," I said, trying to soothe her. But I knew it wasn't a mistake. There was only one other person who occasionally helped Mom with errands, one other person who could have accessed her wallet. I called Marcus. His phone went to voice. Mail, as it often did when he didn't want to talk. I left a message. "Marcus, call me. We need to talk about Mom's credit card. There are some strange charges." He called back a day later, his voice a smooth blend of charm and practiced concern. "Hey, Jan. Sorry, I was in back-to-back meetings. What's up?" I got straight to the point. "There's a $4,000 charge on Mom's card for a hotel in Miami, and another $2,000 for flights." He sighed dramatically, a sound I knew all too well. It was the sound of a carefully crafted performance beginning. "Oh, that," he said, his tone dripping with pity. "Jan, you know how she's getting. She's been talking about wanting to go to Florida for weeks. She probably saw a commercial and just booked it, then forgot. It's heartbreaking, isn't it, seeing her like this?" He was blaming her. He was using her memory loss, the very thing that made her so vulnerable, as a shield. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed to be calm. "Marcus, she can barely use her TV remote. You really think she booked a multi-leg flight and a 5-star hotel online by herself?" "You're not there every day," he shot back, a defensive edge to his voice. "You don't see the good days she has. Sometimes she's perfectly lucid. Maybe one of her friends helped her. You should be more worried about her state of mind and less about the money." He twisted it, making me the cold, unfeeling daughter who cared more about finances than her mother's well-being. It was a classic Marcus move. He was a master of emotional manipulation. I ended the call feeling sick. Part of me, a small, desperate part, wanted to believe him. It was easier to believe that Mom's mind was slipping faster than I thought than to accept that my own brother was a thief. But my gut, the same instinct that told me when a company's financial reports were hiding something, was screaming at me. The numbers didn't lie, and the story Marcus was telling didn't add up. The promise I made to my mother echoed in my mind. Protecting her wasn't just about managing her finances anymore. It was about protecting her from her own son. In the weeks that followed that first phone call, the situation escalated. The trickle of suspicious charges became a flood. There was a weekend at a spa resort in Arizona. A series of expensive dinners at restaurants I knew my mother had never even heard of. A shopping spree at a high-end men's clothing store. The debt on her cards swelled, growing from a manageable sum to a monstrous figure that loomed over her modest retirement savings. The total was approaching $30,000. Each time a new statement arrived, I would call Marcus, and each time he would have a new, more elaborate explanation. The spa resort. Mom was feeling down, Jan. She was talking about wanting to feel pampered. She must have seen an ad and thought it was a good idea. Her mind works in strange ways now. The expensive dinners. She's probably ordering takeout for her friends in the building. You know how generous she is. The men's clothing? That's the saddest one, Jan, I think. I think she was buying gifts for Dad. She sometimes forgets he's gone. Every excuse was a poisoned dart aimed at my mother's cognitive decline, designed to make me feel guilty for even questioning it. He painted a portrait of a confused, lonely old woman squandering her savings in a fog of dementia, and he, the devoted son, was just trying to protect her dignity. He was so convincing that for a brief period, I almost fell for it. I started to doubt myself. Was I being too cynical? Was I letting my complicated history with Marcus color my judgment? Maybe he was right. Maybe I was so focused on the balance sheets that I couldn't see the human tragedy unfolding. The creditor calls started soon after. They were relentless. They'd call my mother's house first, and she would get flustered and confused, which only worsened her anxiety. She'd phone me in a panic, crying that some angry man was on the phone talking about money she didn't understand. It was heartbreaking. I quickly had all her calls forwarded to my cell phone and updated the contact information on her accounts. From then on, I was the one fielding the calls. "Ma'am, we're calling about an overdue balance of $12,450 on the Visa card ending in 4277. A dispassionate voice would say, "I am the power of attorney for the account holder," I'd reply, my voice tight with stress. "We are aware of the balance and are reviewing the charges. There may be fraudulent activity." The word fraud felt strange and hollow in my mouth. It was a word for strangers, for faceless criminals, not for your own brother. But what else could I call it? The real turning point came during a visit to Mom's apartment. I was helping her sort through a pile of mail that had accumulated on her kitchen counter. Bills, junk mail, and a few magazines. As I was putting the bills into a folder, a thick, glossy travel brochure fell out from between the pages of a catalog. It was for a luxury cruise to the Caribbean. "What's this, Mom?" I asked, holding it up. She peered at it over her reading glasses. "Oh, that. Marcus brought it over. He said we should go on a trip together, just the three of us. Isn't that a lovely idea?" My blood ran cold. "He brought this over." "Yes, last week," she said, smiling fondly. "He was talking all about the beautiful beaches and the warm sun. He's so thoughtful, always thinking of ways to cheer me up." Thoughtful, the word hung in the air. He was planting the seeds. He was creating a narrative, a backstory to support his lies. If a charge for a cruise appeared on her statement, he would be able to say, "See, we talked about it. She wanted to go." He wasn't just reacting to my questions anymore, he was proactively building his alibi. This wasn't a series of impulsive, greedy acts. This was a calculated campaign of theft and deception, and he was using our mother's love for him as his primary tool. That evening, I went home and couldn't sleep. The image of the brochure was burned into my mind. I thought about all the times I'd covered for Marcus, all the money I'd loaned him, all the excuses I'd made for him to our parents. I had been an enabler. My desire for family harmony had made me complicit in his behavior for years. Now, that same behavior was threatening to ruin our mother's financial security, the security our father had worked his entire life to provide for her. The next morning, I called my best friend, Sophia. Sophia wasn't just my friend since college, she was a forensic accountant. She dealt with financial fraud for a living. I had been hesitant to bring her into this, ashamed of my family's mess, but I was out of my depth. "Sophia," I said, my voice cracking, "I need your help. I think my brother is stealing from my mom." I laid out the whole story, from the first suspicious charge to the cruise brochure. I expected shock, but Sophia was calm and methodical. She listened patiently, letting me pour out all my fears and frustrations. "Okay, Janet," she said when I finally finished. "First, breathe. You're not crazy. Your instincts are spot on. This has all the hallmarks of familial financial abuse. He's using her cognitive decline as a cover. It's disgustingly common." Her validation was like a lifeline. "What do I do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "You need proof," she said, her tone shifting from comforting friend to sharp professional. "Right now, it's your word against his. His story, as awful as it is plausible to an outsider. You're the financial analyst, and he's the loving son. He could easily paint you as cold and controlling. We need irrefutable evidence that links him directly to these purchases." "But how?" I asked. "The credit card companies will just say the charges were made on her card." "We need to go beyond the statements," Sophia explained. "We need to find the source. Flight confirmations, hotel bookings, purchase receipts. These things are almost always sent to an email address. Does your mother have an email account?" "Yes, she does," I said slowly, a thought beginning to form. "She never uses it. My dad set it up for her years ago. I have the password written down somewhere. I manage it for her." "And does Marcus know about this email account?" Sophia asked. "I doubt it. He never bothered with her technical stuff. That was always my job." A silence fell between us, but it was filled with a dawning, terrible understanding. Sophia didn't need to say another word. I knew what I had to do. I had to log into my mother's email account, an account that had sat dormant for years. I had to look for the digital breadcrumbs that Marcus, in his arrogance, might have left behind. The thought of what I might find filled me with a mixture of dread and grim determination. The facade was cracking, and I was about to take a hammer to it. That night, after making sure my mother was settled and asleep, I went home and opened my laptop. The house was silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. Finding the scrap of paper with my mother's email login felt like unearthing a key to a secret, forbidden room. It was tucked into the back of her old address book, written in my dad's neat, methodical script. Helen Parker 78 at email.com. It was a relic from a time when the internet was a novelty to her, a tool she never quite embraced. My hands trembled as I typed in the username and password. I half expected the login to fail, for the password to be long expired. But it worked. The screen refreshed, and I was looking at an inbox that was a digital time capsule. Most of the emails were from a decade ago, newsletters from gardening websites, notifications from a library book club, a few clumsy emails from my dad when he was on a business trip. For the last 5 years, it had been almost entirely spam. I scrolled through pages of junk mail, my hopes starting to fade. Maybe this was a dead end. Maybe Marcus was smarter than I thought. And then I saw it. It was an email from 6 months ago with the subject line, "Your flight to Miami is confirmed." The sender was a major airline. My breath caught in my chest. I clicked on it. The email opened, and the world seemed to narrow to the glowing words on the screen. It was a booking confirmation for a round-trip, first-class ticket to Miami. The dates matched the charges on my mother's credit card perfectly. The name of the passenger was listed in bold letters, Marcus Parker. I felt a wave of nausea. It was one thing to suspect, to piece together clues and draw a logical conclusion. It was another thing entirely to see the proof in stark, undeniable black and white. He hadn't even bothered to be clever. He hadn't used a burner email or covered his tracks. He had used our mother's forgotten email address, likely assuming no one would ever look there. It was pure arrogance. I scrolled down. Attached to the confirmation was the receipt. The total was over $2,000, paid with a Visa card. The last 4 digits were 4277, my mother's card. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I clicked back to the inbox and started searching, using keywords: hotel, booking, confirmation, receipt. The floodgates opened. It was all there. A confirmation from the high-end hotel in Miami Beach, booked for a king suite with an ocean view. The guest name, Marcus Parker. A reservation for a spa weekend in Scottsdale, Arizona, including a golfer's massage and a hot stone treatment. The reservation was for one person, Marcus Parker. A receipt from a high-end designer clothing store for 2 suits, 3 shirts, and a pair of Italian leather shoes. The shipping address was Marcus's apartment. Item after item, trip after trip, luxury after luxury, all paid for with our mother's money, all documented in this digital graveyard of his deceit. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The sheer scale of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just a few desperate grabs for cash. This was a sustained, systematic plundering of our mother's life savings. He was living a life of luxury while she was at home, her world growing smaller and more confusing each day. He wasn't just stealing her money, he was stealing her security, her peace of mind, the comfortable retirement my father had worked so hard to give her. The anger came next, a white-hot rage that eclipsed the shock and the hurt. I thought of every condescending lecture he'd given me about being too uptight about money. I thought of every pitying look he'd given me when he talked about Mom's forgetfulness. He hadn't been protecting her dignity, he had been exploiting her vulnerability in the most cynical way imaginable. He was a parasite, and I had been too blind, too willing to keep the peace, to see it until now. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously documenting everything. I saved each email as a PDF. I took screenshots of the confirmations, making sure the passenger name, the booking details, and the credit card information were all clearly visible. I created a new, encrypted folder on my hard drive and named it Evidence. As I worked, my analytical mind took over, suppressing the emotional storm inside me. This was no longer just a family drama. This was a crime. And I was going to build a case. The final discovery was the one that broke me. Tucked away in the sent folder were a series of emails from Marcus to a woman I didn't know. They were recent, sent just a few weeks ago. He had forwarded her the confirmation for a trip to Hawaii. "Everything's booked, baby," the email read. Get ready for paradise. You deserve it. The flight details showed 2 passengers, Marcus Parker and her. The hotel was a beachfront villa at a 5-star resort. The total cost was over $10,000, all charged to a new credit card I hadn't even received the first statement for yet. I now knew what it would show. He wasn't just funding his own lavish lifestyle. He was funding a romantic getaway. He was using our mother's money to impress a girlfriend while simultaneously fielding calls from me where he feigned concern over Mom's frivolous spending. The hypocrisy was so profound, it made me feel dizzy. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness, not anymore. They were tears of rage. The promise I made to my mother wasn't just about paying her bills on time. It was about protecting her from harm. And the greatest harm to her wasn't her fading memory. It was her own son. The game was over. Marcus thought he was playing chess with a pawn, but he was about to find out he was playing with a queen. And she was done holding back. The next morning, I woke up with a cold, clear sense of purpose. The Emodio. Now turmoil of the previous night had settled into a steely resolve. The time for doubt and hurt was over. Now was the time for action. With my folder of digital evidence, I felt armed and ready. My first call was to Sophia. "I found it," I said, my voice devoid of its usual warmth. "I found everything." I met her at her office an hour later. It was a Saturday, but she came in just for me. Her workspace was as organized and precise as she was, a stark contrast to the chaos that had been my life for the past few months. I opened my laptop and walked her through the emails, one by one. The flights, the hotels, the shopping sprees, the romantic getaway to Hawaii. She listened without interruption, her expression growing more grim with each new piece of evidence. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long, slow breath. "Wow," she said softly. "He's not just greedy, Janet. He's brazen. Using her actual email account, that's a level of arrogance I rarely see." "He thought no one would ever look," I said. "He counted on me believing his lies about Mom's memory. He counted on her being too confused to question him." "And he would have gotten away with it," Sophia agreed. "This is a fortress. With you as power of attorney and this evidence, you have him cornered. So the question is, what do you want to do? There are 2 paths here, the legal path and the personal one." She explained the options. The legal path involved going to the police. We could file a report for elder financial abuse and fraud. It would be a long, messy process. It would involve detectives, lawyers, and potentially a criminal trial. It would become public record, and our family name would be dragged through the mud. My mother, in her fragile state, would have to be involved, at least peripherally. The thought of putting her through that kind of stress was unbearable. "What's the personal path?" I asked. "The personal path is about leverage," Sophia said, her eyes sharp. "You don't go to the police, not yet. You use this evidence to force a resolution. You control the narrative. You get the money back, and you ensure he can never do this again. It's quieter, faster, and it protects your mother from the trauma of a legal battle." My choice was instant. "The personal path," I said. "I want to protect my mother above all else, but I don't just want the money back. I want him to understand what he's done. I want him to face the consequences." "Good," Sophia nodded. "That's what I would choose. Now, let's get to work. Your evidence is strong, but we can make it ironclad. We need to follow the money, not just from your mother's accounts, but into his." For the next week, Sophia and I became a 2-person investigative team. She guided me on what to look for, and I used my authority as POA to get the necessary documents. First, I requested detailed statements for all of Mom's credit cards and bank accounts going back 2 years. I wanted to see exactly when the spending started and if there were patterns. The statements told a clear story. The extravagant spending began shortly after Marcus's startup had supposedly secured a new round of seed funding, a story he had proudly told the whole family. It was obvious now that the seed funding was our mother. The charges always coincided with periods when he was out of town, often posting vague but glamorous photos on social media about business trips or networking events. He was building a public image of a successful tech entrepreneur on a foundation of stolen retirement funds. Next, Sophia advised me to get access to Marcus's own financial records if possible. This was the tricky part. I didn't have legal authority over his accounts. But then I remembered something. Years ago, before the startup, Marcus had hit a rough patch and I had co-signed a loan for him to consolidate his debt. He paid it off, but for a time, I was listed on his main checking account as a co-signer. On a long shot, I called the bank. I explained the old co-signer situation, and after answering a dozen security questions, I found out the account was still technically joint, even though he was the only one who used it. He had simply never bothered to do the paperwork to remove my name. It was a stunning piece of administrative sloppiness on his part, another example of his arrogance. The bank agreed to send me the statements. When they arrived, it felt like holding the final piece of the puzzle. I spread them out on my dining room table next to my mother's statements. With Sophia on video call, we started tracing the payments. And there it was. Large, regular payments from Marcus's checking account directly to his own personal credit cards, and the timing was undeniable. A $5,000 withdrawal from Mom's savings account would be followed a day later by a $5,000 payment to Marcus's American Express, the same card he used for his daily expenses. A cash advance from Mom's Visa would be deposited, and then an identical amount would be used to pay his rent. He wasn't just charging vacations to her cards. He was systematically draining her cash reserves, laundering the money through his own account to pay for his entire life. The startup wasn't just failing, it was a mirage. He had no income. Our mother was his sole investor, and she didn't even know it. "You've got him, Janet," Sophia said, her voice a mix of admiration and disgust. "This is a slam dunk. You have the fraudulent charges, the email confirmations linking him to the purchases, and the bank statements showing him moving the stolen money to pay his own bills. He has no way out. He can't blame your mother's forgetfulness for bank transfers into his own account." Looking at the mountain of paper spread across my table, a testament to my brother's greed and my mother's stolen security, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound and heavy sadness. But underneath the sadness, my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. Sophia was right. He had no way out. Now, all I had to do was design the cage. I was the quiet architect of his downfall, and I was going to build it with the same precision and care that he had used to construct his web of lies. With the evidence compiled and the case against Marcus undeniable, the question shifted from what happened to what's next. My rage had cooled into a focused, calculated determination. A simple confrontation wouldn't be enough. Yelling and crying would give him an opening to deploy his usual tactics of deflection and emotional manipulation. He would turn my anger against me, paint me as hysterical, and try to position himself as the victim of a misunderstanding. No, this couldn't be an emotional outburst. It had to be a strategic demolition. I spent the next few days planning the confrontation with the precision of a corporate takeover. I chose the venue, my mother's dining room. It was neutral ground, but it was also the heart of our family, the place where we had shared countless meals and celebrations. I wanted the weight of that history to be present when his betrayal was laid bare. I decided it had to be just the three of us. Bringing in Sophia or anyone else would allow him to claim he was being ambushed. This had to be a family matter, a reckoning between a mother and her two children. My plan had several phases. First, I needed to secure my mother's assets completely. The night before the planned confrontation, I logged into all of her online banking portals. I changed every password. I put alerts on all of her accounts that would notify my phone of any transaction over $1. Then, I called the credit card companies. I reported the cards as stolen, which they were, and had them canceled and reissued to my address. I effectively cut off his access to every last penny. The well had run dry, he just didn't know it yet. Next, I prepared my presentation. I didn't just have a folder of evidence, I created a narrative. I printed everything: the emails, the flight confirmations, the hotel bills. I highlighted Marcus's name on every single document. I printed the bank statements, using different colored markers to draw clear lines showing the money flowing from our mother's accounts directly into his. I put it all into a thick, black binder, with tabbed sections for each trip and each major expenditure. On the cover, I printed a simple, stark title, Marcus's Expenditures, a financial review. I was going to speak to him in the only language he seemed to respect, the appearance of professional authority. The most difficult part of the plan was deciding how to handle my mother. I couldn't, in good conscience, drop this bombshell on her without preparation. Her health was too fragile. The shock could be devastating. But she also deserved to know the truth, at least a version of it she could process. The afternoon before our family dinner, I sat down with her in her sunlit living room. I held her hand and spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "Mom," I began, "I've been going through your finances, and I've found some serious problems. There have been a lot of large charges and withdrawals that you didn't make." Her face clouded with worry. "Oh dear, did I do something wrong? My memory is just so, it's like a sieve sometimes." This was the moment. I could let her believe she was at fault just as Marcus had. But the promise I'd made to her, the promise to protect her, meant protecting her from that pain too. "No, Mom," I said firmly but kindly. "You did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing. It turns out Marcus has been having some very serious financial trouble. He got in over his head, and he made some terrible mistakes. He used your accounts to pay for things without asking." I chose my words carefully. Mistakes instead of theft. Financial trouble instead of deceit. It was a softened version of the truth, designed to protect her from the sharpest edges of the betrayal. Her eyes fill. Ed with tears, but they were tears of concern for her son, not of fear for herself. "Oh, my poor Marcus," she whispered. "Is he okay? Why didn't he just ask for help?" "That's what we're going to talk about tonight, Mom," I said. "The three of us. I need you to be strong, and I need you to trust me. I have a plan to fix everything, but I need you to let me handle the conversation with Marcus. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You've always been the responsible one, Janet. I trust you." That evening, I set the table for 3. I didn't cook an elaborate meal. I just ordered a simple dinner from a local restaurant she liked. This wasn't a celebration, it was an intervention. When Marcus arrived, he was in classic form, all smiles and charm. He kissed Mom on the cheek and handed her a small bouquet of flowers. He gave me a casual, "Hey, Jan," as if we hadn't been engaged in a cold war over the phone for weeks. "Smells good," he said, rubbing his hands together. "What's the occasion?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice even. "Sit down." The shift in my tone was so abrupt it wiped the smile right off his face. He looked from me to my mother, who was sitting at the head of the table, looking nervous but resolute. He sat down, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes for the first time. The architect had built the room. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. I reached for the black binder I had placed on the sideboard. The final phase of the plan was about to begin. I placed the thick black binder on the center of the dining table with a solid, definitive thud. The sound echoed in the tense silence. Marcus stared at it, his brow furrowed in confusion. The title, Marcus's Expenditures, a financial review, was facing him. "What is this?" he asked, trying for a light, dismissive tone, but his voice was strained. "Bringing your work home, Jan? A little intense for a family dinner." "This isn't my work," I replied, my voice cold and steady. I pulled out my chair and sat down opposite him. "It's yours." I opened the binder to the first tab, labeled Miami Trip. I turned it around so he could see the neatly organized page. The flight confirmation with his name on it, the hotel booking for the Ocean View suite, the credit card statement showing the corresponding charges. "Let's start here," I said. $4,000 for a hotel and $2,000 for a first-class flight. You told me Mom booked this in a moment of confusion. But here is the confirmation, sent to her email address, with your name listed as the sole passenger. Would you care to explain?" The color drained from his face. He looked from the papers to me, his charming facade crumbling to reveal a panicked, cornered animal. I don't know what that is. You can't trust those things. The internet gets things wrong all the time. It's not just the internet, Marcus. I flipped to the next section, Scottsdale Spa Weekend. And then the next, designer wardrobe. With each turn of the page, I laid out another piece of his deception, my voice never rising, never cracking. I presented it not as an accuser, but as an auditor presenting findings. The clinical, detached approach was more effective than any screaming match could have been. It gave him no emotional ammunition to fire back. He couldn't call me hysterical. I was simply stating facts. He sputtered, trying to interrupt. This is insane. You've been spying on me, going through Mom's things. This is a violation of privacy. I am Mom's power of attorney, I stated calmly. It is my legal duty to review her finances and protect her from fraud. And this, I said, tapping the binder, is fraud. Our mother had been silent until now, watching with wide, heartbroken eyes. Marcus, she said, her voice trembling but clear. Janet told me you were in trouble. Is this true? Did you do this? He saw an opening. He turned to her, his eyes welling up with crocodile tears. Mom, she's twisting everything. I was in a bind, yes. A business deal fell through. I was going to pay it all back. I was just borrowing it. I was going to surprise you, pay it all back with interest, and take you on that cruise for real. It was a masterful performance, a desperate, last-ditch effort to appeal to her sympathy. But I was ready for it. Borrowing, I interjected, my voice cutting through his act. Let's turn to the section on bank transfers. I flipped to the back of the binder, where I had the statements laid out side by side. Here is $10,000 withdrawn from Mom's savings account. And here, 2 days later, is a $10,000 payment from your checking account to your girlfriend for what you called a loan repayment. And here is the confirmation for your trip to Hawaii, booked the very next day. Who were you borrowing from, Marcus? Mom or your girlfriend? That was the final blow. The mention of the girlfriend, the proof that he was using Mom's money. For a romantic escapade, shattered his last defense. He slumped in his chair, defeated. The silence in the room was absolute. He had nothing left. No lies, no excuses. I closed the binder. The total amount you have stolen from Mom is $47,312, I said, the number precise and damning. Here is what is going to happen. I have prepared a document. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. This is a confession of guilt and a repayment agreement. You will sign it tonight. It states that you admit to misappropriating the funds and outlines a payment plan. You will pay back every single cent. I don't care how. Get a second job. Sell your car. Sell your designer clothes. Your life of luxury is over. He stared at the paper as if it were a snake. And if I don't sign, he whispered, his voice hoarse. If you don't sign, I said, leaning forward, then tomorrow morning a copy of this entire binder goes to the district attorney's office. Sophia has already consulted with a legal expert. This is a clear-cut case of elder financial abuse, a felony. You will be prosecuted and you will likely go to jail. And I will make sure Mom is protected from having to testify, but the world will know exactly what you did. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Your choice. He looked at our mother, his face a mask of desperation. He was searching for his ally, his protector, the one person who had always excused his behavior. But Mom looked back at him, her expression not of anger, but of profound disappointment, a look that was far more devastating. You broke my heart, Marcus, she said softly. You used my love and you used my illness. Sign the paper. Her words sealed his fate. He picked up the pen with a shaking hand. As the ink flowed onto the paper, it felt like a final, binding judgment. The debt was no longer just a number on a page. It was a concrete obligation, a chain he had forged for himself. There was no triumph in watching him sign, only a grim sense of justice and a deep, aching sadness for the family we could no longer be. He had made his choices, and now, finally, the bill had come due. After Marcus signed the papers, he left without another word. He didn't look at me, and he couldn't meet our mother's eyes. The front door clicked shut behind him, and in the silence he left behind, it felt like a fever had finally broken. The tension that had been building for months dissipated, leaving only exhaustion and a fragile, uncertain peace. My mother and I sat at the dining table for a long time, the signed confession lying between us like a treaty ending a long and painful war. The weeks that followed were a period of quiet rebuilding. The first payment from Marcus arrived exactly on schedule, a cashier's check delivered by courier. It was a fraction of what he owed, but it was a start. It was proof that the threat of legal action was real enough to ensure his compliance. I later found out through a mutual acquaintance that he had sold his car and was trying to sublet his expensive apartment. His glamorous social media presence went dark. The startup founder persona vanished overnight, replaced by the quiet reality of a man forced to confront the consequences of his actions. We had no contact with him beyond the monthly checks that appeared like clockwork. He didn't call, not even on Mom's birthday. In a way, his silence was its own form of confession. My focus shifted entirely to my mother. The revelation of Marcus's betrayal, even the softened version I had given her, had taken its toll. She was quieter, more withdrawn. But as the days turned into weeks, something remarkable happened. With Marcus out of the picture, a weight seemed to lift from our relationship. Without him there to play us against each other, me the stern caretaker, him the fun-loving son, we found a new, simpler dynamic. I started spending more time with her, not just as a manager of her affairs, but as her daughter. We would sit in her garden, watch old movies, or work on puzzles together. We talked about my father, about her childhood, about books she had loved. In her moments of lucidity, I saw the brilliant, witty woman she had always been. In her moments of confusion, I learned to be more patient, more present. I was no longer just protecting her finances. I was protecting her joy, her memories, her peace. About 6 months after the confrontation, I made a decision. I took the money Marcus had paid back so far, combined it with some of my own savings, and I booked a trip. It wasn't a lavish, 5-star vacation. It was a quiet week in a rented cottage by a lake a few hours north, a place my mother had loved to visit when I was a child. When I told her, her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Oh, Janet," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I remember that place. Your father used to take us fishing there." That week by the lake was transformative. We didn't do much. We sat by the water, we read books, we cooked simple meals. One sunny afternoon, as we sat on the porch, she turned to me. "You're a good daughter, Janet," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Your father would be so proud of you. You protected me." Tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't praise I had been seeking, but hearing those words from her felt like a validation of every difficult decision I had made. The weight of responsibility I had carried for so long finally felt less like a burden and more like an honor. The story of what Marcus did was never spoken of again between us. The wound was too deep, and healing required leaving it undisturbed. The truth had served its purpose. It had stopped the bleeding and allowed us to move forward. The future was still uncertain. My mother's condition would not improve, and I knew there were more challenges ahead. But we would face them together, our bond forged stronger in the crucible of betrayal. I had set out to get justice for my mother, to reclaim what was stolen. I succeeded in that. The spreadsheets balanced, the debt was being repaid, and the thief had been held accountable. But in the aftermath, I realized I had gained something far more valuable. I had lost a brother, but I had truly found my mother again. I had built a fortress of evidence to tear down his lies, but in doing so, I had also built a sanctuary for her, a place where she could live out her remaining years with the dignity, security, and love she so richly deserved. The numbers on a balance sheet could be restored, but this new legacy of peace was priceless.